At dinner that night, my daughter looked straight at me and said words I'll never forget. "You're just another mouth to feed. I'm tired of spending money on your medication." No one said a word. Not my son-in-law, who suddenly found his plate very interesting. Not my grandson, who didn't even look up from his phone. The silence was louder than her words. "If you're here, I'm really glad you found my story. Stay until the end, and comment which city you're watching from so I know how far this story travels." At 67, I never imagined I'd end up living under my daughter's roof. After my mild stroke 2 years ago, she'd said, "Move in, Mom. It'll be safer. We'll take care of you." What she really meant was, she'd take control. My voice shook when I tried to respond. "Isla, I do contribute. But she cut me off with a dismissive wave. "Your check barely covers your medicine. Do you even realize how expensive it is? And that special food your doctor insists on? We're drowning here, Mom." Her husband mumbled, "Maybe we should talk about this later." But she wouldn't stop. "Kyle needs braces. The roof's leaking. We keep putting everything off because of you." I turned to my grandson, hoping for even a little sympathy, but he stood up and left the table. That hurt more than anything. "I never asked to be a burden," I said quietly. "Well, you are one," she snapped, then softened. "I didn't mean that. I'm just stressed. You know I love having you here." But I'd already seen the truth. In her eyes, I was no longer her mother. I was a problem to manage. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the small guest room, staring at the ceiling, remembering my own house, the warm, 3-bedroom home where I raised her after her father passed, the home I still owned, the one she'd convinced me to leave because it was too much to handle. By morning, I had made my decision. I dressed in my best blue dress and put on the pearl earrings my late husband gave me on our 20th anniversary. I wanted to remind myself who I was, capable, strong, not a burden. "You're dressed up," Isla said at breakfast, eyeing me suspiciously. "I have an appointment," I told her. "With your doctor?" she asked. "Not this time," I said calmly. "With a real estate agent." Her coffee cup froze in midair. "A what?" "I'm selling my house." "Mom, we talked about this. You can't live alone anymore." "I know," I said, picking up my purse, "but I also don't need to keep an empty house, especially since I'm such a financial burden to you." Her face turned red. "About last night, I didn't mean—" "You meant it," I said gently. "And it's all right. You have your own family now, I understand." She stammered, "But the house... We thought maybe Kyle could live there for college. It's near the university." And that's when it all made sense. That was the plan all along. Keep Mom quiet in the spare room until it was time to take her home. "I've made up my mind," I said. "The meeting's at 10. As I walked out, I heard her on the phone, panicked, calling her husband. But for the first time in years, I felt free. At the real estate office, the agent, a kind woman named Patricia, showed me the market value. When I saw the number, I nearly gasped. My home had grown in value far more than I'd ever imagined. Patricia noticed my smile. "Are you all right, Mrs. Wilson?" "Yes," I said softly. "I truly am." When I got back to Isla's house, I had 17 missed calls. I knew what they meant. The real battle was just beginning. But this time, it would be my fight. But there was one thing I knew with absolute certainty. I would never again allow myself to be just another mouth to feed. The moment I stepped back into Isla's house, I could feel the tension hanging thick in the air. Trevor was pacing in the living room, and Isla came rushing toward me, her face flushed with panic and anger. "What were you thinking?" she demanded. "You can't just make big decisions like this without consulting us." I set my purse down calmly. "I don't need anyone's permission to sell my own property, Isla." "But Mom, you're not—" She stopped mid-sentence, but I knew exactly what she was about to say. Not capable, not stable, not smart enough to make my own choices. "Not what?" I asked softly but firmly. Trevor stepped in, the peacemaker as always. "Norma, we're just worried about you. It's a huge step, and with your health—" "My health is fine," I interrupted. The stroke was 2 years ago. My doctor says I'm doing great. I take my medication, I exercise, and my mind is perfectly clear. That's not the point, Isla snapped, throwing up her hands. We're family. We make decisions together. That house has been part of our family for decades. You can't just sell it because your feelings got hurt at dinner. My feelings hurt? As if I were a child denied dessert. Patricia, my real estate agent, says the house could sell for nearly double what we expected, I said, steering the conversation back to facts. The neighborhood's become quite desirable lately. I saw the way Isla and Trevor exchanged glances, quick, calculating. Something flickered between them, surprise and greed. That's wonderful, Mom, Isla said, her voice suddenly gentle. All the more reason to think this through. Maybe we could rent it instead. You'd still have income and the property would stay in the family. I shook my head slowly. I've made up my mind. That night, lying in bed, memories came rushing back. Buying that house with Harold, my late husband. How proud we were of that little starter home, the small backyard where Isla took her first steps. After Harold died suddenly when she was just 8, I'd worked 2 jobs to keep that roof over our heads. I skipped lunches so she could have new clothes, postponed repairs so she could keep dancing, gave up my dream of college so she could chase hers. Every sacrifice I made was for her. When did I stop being her mother and become just a financial inconvenience? The next morning, I woke early, made myself coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. My income wasn't much, but with the sale of the house, I could live comfortably, independently, for years to come. You're up early, Trevor said, walking in. He poured his coffee, then sat across from me. His tone was serious. Isla's really upset, you know. I know, I replied, closing the notebook. He sighed. Look, Norma, what she said the other night, it wasn't right, but she's under a lot of pressure. The mortgage, Kyle's college fund, my job's not as stable as it used to be. I understand pressure, I said quietly. I raised Isla alone on a teacher's aide salary after her father passed, and I never once complained about how expensive it was to raise her. He looked embarrassed. You're right, it's just, we were kind of counting on that house. There it was, the truth, spoken aloud. Counting on it for what? I asked, though I already knew. He hesitated, staring into his cup. We've been having some financial problems. We thought maybe we could take out a home equity loan on your property, just until things settle. Isla didn't want to worry you. No, she just wanted control. I'm sorry about your situation, I said calmly, but I need to secure my own future now. Later that day, I went to see my doctor for a regular checkup. As Dr. Reynolds took my blood pressure, I asked something that had been bothering me for days. Are my medications really that expensive? My daughter says they're draining her savings. Dr. Reynolds frowned, puzzled. Mrs. Wilson, your prescriptions are all generic. With your insurance, they shouldn't cost more than $30 a month. Total, $30. A cold realization spread through me. That was the massive burden she'd been complaining about. Is something wrong? Dr. Reynolds asked gently. Just realizing a few things, I said quietly. When I got home, I decided to check the medicine bottles myself. They were kept in a kitchen cabinet. Isla insisted on managing them for me. But as I looked closer, I noticed something strange. The labels had been replaced with plain white ones and handwritten instructions. I called the pharmacy, pretending to ask about a refill. When I gave them my name, the pharmacist confirmed it. My daughter had been picking up my prescriptions for months and paying next to nothing. Where had the rest of my money been going? Every month I gave Isla $200 from my Social Security check for household expenses and my medication. I'd trusted her completely. That evening, I sat in the backyard watching the sunset bleed across the sky when Kyle came out and sat beside me. At 16, he was caught somewhere between boyhood and manhood, usually glued to his phone, rarely this quiet. "Grandma?" he asked after a moment. "Are you really selling your house?" "Yes," I said softly. "I am." He nodded, picking at a loose thread on his jeans. Mom's really mad. I heard her and Dad arguing about it last night. I'm sorry you had to hear that, I told him. It's not your fault, he shrugged. Mom's always stressed about money, even though Dad makes good money, and they just bought that new SUV last month. I froze. A new SUV? I repeated. They hadn't mentioned that. Kyle, honey, I asked gently, have your parents talked about my house before? Do they have plans for it? He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Kind of. Mom said once the house is hers, they could sell it and buy a vacation cabin at the lake. She's been looking at listings for months. My chest tightened. So that was it. The plan all along, wait for me to pass or declare me unfit, then sell my home for a vacation property. When Kyle went back inside, I sat there for a long time, the evening air turning cool around me. This wasn't just about reclaiming my independence anymore. It was about protecting myself from the very people who were supposed to protect me. The next morning, my real estate agent called. She already had 3 interested buyers. The market was hot, and my well-kept mid-century home in a prime neighborhood wouldn't stay available for long. As I hung up, I caught Isla standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. So you're really going through with this? She asked flatly. Yes, I replied. I am. The following morning, I woke to shouting downstairs. I recognized Isla's voice instantly, sharp, furious. How could you let this happen? She was yelling. You were supposed to keep an eye on her finances. I tried, Isla, Trevor said, his tone weary, but your mother's perfectly capable. She has every right to sell her own property. We had plans for that money, she cried. The lake cabin, Kyle's college fund, our retirement, everything we've been working toward. Everything we've been working toward, Trevor snapped. That's her house, Isla, not ours. We never should have counted on it. Their voices dropped, and I couldn't hear the rest. But I didn't need to. I stood frozen in the hallway, the realization cutting deep. They had planned my financial future as if I were already gone, treating my home, my one symbol of security, like a prize waiting to be claimed. Later, as I sat in the kitchen sipping tea, Isla appeared again. Her eyes were puffy, her smile tight. Mom, she began, we need to talk about this house situation. I set my cup down. What about it? I've been doing some research, she said, sitting across from me. There are concerns about your capacity to make major financial decisions after your stroke. My heart thudded. What are you saying, Isla? I'm saying we might need to consider a guardianship arrangement. Her tone was soft, but her eyes were cold. Just to protect you from making hasty choices you might regret later. The meaning was clear. If I didn't back down, she would try to have me declared legally incompetent. I had a mild stroke 2 years ago, I said evenly. Dr. Reynolds has confirmed my cognition is perfectly normal. Cognitive decline can be subtle, Mom, she insisted. You might not even realize. Stop. My voice came out sharper than I meant. I know exactly what you're doing, and it won't work. Her expression hardened instantly. I'm trying to protect you, she said. No, I replied quietly. You're trying to protect your inheritance. The mask fell completely. Do you have any idea how much we've sacrificed for you? She snapped. The vacations we've skipped, the home repairs we've delayed, all because of your needs. And now you want to sell the one asset that could make up for all that? I never asked you to give up anything for me, I said. In fact, Kyle mentioned your new SUV. That doesn't sound like sacrifice. Her face flushed crimson. That's different. We needed a reliable car, she shot back, rising from her chair. Fine, sell the house, but don't expect us to keep supporting you once you've burned through that money. She stormed out, leaving the kitchen silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. My hands trembled as I exhaled slowly. It was clear now. I needed legal help, someone who could protect me from my own daughter's threats. That's when I remembered Judith, my old friend, a retired attorney. We'd lost touch after I moved in with Isla, who always claimed Judith was a bad influence because she encouraged my independence too much. Now I realized that independence might be the only thing standing between me and losing everything I had left. Now I finally understood why Isla had kept me away from Judith all these years, because Judith was the kind of friend who saw through manipulation and fought back. I found her number in my old address book and called from the landline while Isla was out running errands. "Norma!" Judith's warm, familiar voice came through the receiver. "It's been ages. How are you?" I need your help," I said, my voice trembling. "My daughter's trying to control my finances. She's threatening to file for guardianship so I can't sell my house." Judith's cheerful tone vanished instantly. "Tell me everything," she said, and I did. I told her about that awful dinner, the lies about my medication costs, the argument I'd overheard, and Isla's latest threat. When I finished, Judith was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice steady and cold. "Norma, this is elder financial abuse, and emotional abuse too. You need to protect yourself." "How?" I whispered. "If she files for guardianship—" "She won't win," Judith said firmly. "Not if you act first. Get a cognitive assessment from your doctor and secure all your important documents. Can you leave the house tomorrow for a few hours?" "I can," I said. "Good," she replied. "Come to my place. We'll make a plan." For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't alone anymore. That evening, while helping Kyle with his history homework, he asked quietly, "Grandma, are you and Mom fighting because of money?" I smiled sadly. "What money, sweetheart?" He fidgeted with his pencil. "I heard Mom telling Dad you get almost $3,000 a month from Social Security and Grandpa's pension, but you only give them $1,200. A chill went through me. He was right. The rest went into my savings. "Mom says that's selfish," Kyle continued hesitantly, "because they do everything for you. But—" He hesitated, then spoke quickly. "I don't think that's true. You cook dinner most nights, you do your laundry, you even drive yourself places." I reached out and squeezed his hand gently. "Thank you for telling me this, Kyle." "Are you mad at Mom?" he asked softly. "I'm disappointed," I said honestly. "Mostly, I'm just sad that she sees me as a burden instead of her mother." He looked troubled. "Mom says if you sell your house, you'll waste the money and come back broke." I felt anger rise in my chest. "I raised your mother alone after your grandfather passed," I said firmly. "I paid for her schooling, gave her everything she needed. I've never been irresponsible with money. Not once." Kyle nodded. "I know. Dad said the same thing." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my sweet little girl had become someone capable of this kind of betrayal. Had I spoiled her, protected her too much? Or had she simply learned to value comfort over compassion? The next morning, I slipped out quietly to meet Judith. Her condo downtown was small but elegant, filled with books, light, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. More wrinkles, a few gray hairs, but her eyes were the same, sharp, kind, and fearless. "Oh, Norma," she said, pulling me into a hug. "We'll sort this out, I promise." Inside, she had coffee waiting and a notepad ready. For 2 hours, we worked through every detail: my finances, my documents, the house sale, Isla's threats. Judith had already called in a favor from a colleague who specialized in elder law, and Dr. Reynolds agreed to provide a written statement confirming my full cognitive capacity. "The key," Judith said, tapping her pen, "is to act before Isla files anything. Once the house sells, put the funds in a secure trust under your name only. She won't be able to touch it." As I left Judith's condo, I felt a strange mix of strength and grief. I finally had a plan. A path forward. But I'd also lost something precious, the illusion that my daughter's love was unconditional. Family, I realized, should mean protection. But for me, It had become a battlefield. As I walked toward the bus stop, my phone buzzed. A text from Isla. "Where are you? We need to talk." I took a deep breath. The message felt less like concern and more like a summons. I headed home, to a place that no longer felt like home at all. When I pulled into the driveway, Trevor's car was there, and beside it, a sleek, unfamiliar sedan. My stomach tightened. Inside, I heard voices, Isla's, tense and commanding, and a man's, calm and professional. I stepped into the dining room and froze. Isla and Trevor sat across from a man in a charcoal gray suit, flipping through a stack of papers. They all looked up when I appeared. "There you are," Isla said, her smile tight. "Mom, this is Mr. Donovan. He's a family attorney who specializes in elder care." So that was her next move. She hadn't wasted a single day. "I see," I said calmly, setting my purse on the sideboard. "And what brings a family attorney to my dining room, Isla?" Mr. Donovan stood, extending his hand. "Mrs. Wilson, your daughter's concerned about some recent financial decisions you've made. She just wants to ensure your long-term security." I didn't take his hand. "My financial security," I said evenly, "is exactly what I'm trying to protect by selling my own home, Mr. Donovan." "Mom's had some cognitive issues since her stroke," Isla interjected quickly. "She gets confused about money sometimes." The lie hit like a slap. Calculated, cruel. Trevor couldn't meet my eyes. "That's completely false," I said firmly, my voice steadier than I felt. "I had a mild stroke 2 years ago. My doctor has consistently confirmed that my mind is perfectly clear," I said. Mr. Donovan shifted uneasily, glancing between us. It was clear he'd walked into a situation far more complex than my daughter had described. "Perhaps we should reschedule for another time," he offered politely, gathering his papers. "There's no need to reschedule," I replied evenly. "I have no intention of discussing my finances with you, ever." "Mom, you're being ridiculous," Isla snapped. "We're just trying to help you." "By lying to an attorney? By telling him I'm not mentally capable?" Mr. Donovan cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Mrs. Wilson, would you be open to a simple cognitive assessment, just to establish clarity?" "I already have one scheduled with my neurologist," I said, thankful for Judith's advice. "The results will be sent directly to my attorney." "Your attorney?" Isla's voice jumped an octave. "Since when do you have an attorney?" "Since I realized I needed protection, from my own daughter." The room went still. The words hung in the air like a heavy stone that couldn't be taken back. Trevor stood abruptly, walking Mr. Donovan to the door with mumbled apologies. When he returned, his face was tight with anger. "That was humiliating," he said to Isla. "You told me he was coming for estate planning, not guardianship." "What was I supposed to do?" Isla shot back. "She's about to throw away everything we've worked for." "It's not yours to lose," I said quietly. "It never was." Isla turned toward me, tears welling in her eyes. "How can you do this to us, after everything we've done for you?" "What exactly have you done for me?" I asked softly. "You've overcharged me for medication I don't need, taken part of my Social Security, and made me feel unwelcome in my own family's home." Trevor stepped forward, raising his hands as if to calm the storm. "Let's all take a breath," he said gently. "Norma, maybe you should rest. It's been a stressful day." That was the breaking point. "I'm not a child, Trevor," I said firmly. "And I will not be manipulated or gaslit in this house any longer." I turned and walked upstairs. My hands trembled as I began packing the few things I had: clothes, photographs, my late husband's watch. Most of my life was still in storage, untouched. As I folded a sweater, a soft knock came at the door. "Grandma? Can I come in?" Kyle's voice. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. He stepped inside, his expression worried as his eyes fell on the half-packed suitcase. "Are you leaving?" "Just for a little while," I told him gently. "I'm going to stay with my friend Judith until things calm down." He sat beside me, shoulders hunched. "I heard about the lawyer," he said quietly. "Mom's wrong about you, isn't she? About being confused?" "Yes," I said softly. She's wrong. He nodded, almost relieved. I heard them talking last night, he confessed. About the lake house they want to buy with your money. Mom said they deserve it after putting up with you for 2 years. The words cut deep, but they didn't surprise me anymore. Thank you for telling me the truth, Kyle. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled wad of cash. I saved some money from my summer job. It's only $87, but you can have it if you need it. My throat tightened. In that simple, selfless gesture, my grandson showed more kindness than his mother had in years. That's very generous, sweetheart, I said, gently curling his fingers back around the money. But you keep it. I'll be just fine. Promise you'll still visit me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Even if Mom's mad. I promise, I said, hugging him tightly. Nothing could ever keep me away from you. After he left, I called Judith. Can I stay with you for a few days? Of course, she said without hesitation. When the taxi arrived, I carried my small suitcase downstairs. Isla stood waiting in the foyer, arms crossed. Where do you think you're going? She demanded. I'm staying with Judith for a while, I said calmly. We all need some space. So you're running away instead of facing things like an adult? I almost laughed at the irony. Isla, I'm not the one who brought an attorney into the house instead of having a real conversation. Fine, she said coldly. Go stay with Judith. But don't come crawling back when you realize you can't manage on your own. I met her eyes, my voice steady. I raised you by myself after your father died. I think I can manage just fine. With that, I picked up my suitcase and walked out the door. The next few days at Judith's condo were a balm I hadn't realized I needed. Her home was quiet, filled with light and laughter. She introduced me to her circle of friends, strong, independent women in their 60s and 70s who'd built new, fulfilling lives on their own terms. One evening, as we sat on her balcony sharing a glass of wine, I confessed the fear that still haunted me. What if I can't manage on my own? I whispered. Judith chuckled softly, shaking her head. Norma, she said, you've been managing on your own your entire life. You just forgot for a little while. The warmth of her words settled in my heart. She was right. I hadn't lost everything. I'd reclaimed myself. Norma, Judith said one evening, laughing softly as we sat on her balcony. In just 3 days, you've reorganized my kitchen, fixed my Wi-Fi, and cooked the best lasagna I've ever eaten. You're more capable than most people half your age. Her words made me smile, and for the first time in a long while, I actually believed them. The next morning, I had my neurological evaluation. Dr. Patel was thorough, asking questions, giving puzzles, testing memory and logic. When she finished, she smiled warmly. Mrs. Wilson, your cognitive function is excellent, she said. There's no reason you can't make your own financial or personal decisions. Relief washed over me. Would you be willing to put that in writing for my attorney? I asked. She handed me a sealed envelope. Already done. I've included my full report and professional opinion of your complete competence. Armed with that document, I met with Judith's colleague, Martin Green, a quiet, kind man who specialized in elder law. After reviewing everything, he drafted a firm letter to Isla and Mr. Donovan, warning that any attempt at guardianship would be immediately challenged with clear medical proof of my sound mind. He signed it with a flourish and said, "This should stop that problem for good. Now, let's make sure your assets are protected once your home sale is complete." As I left his office, my phone rang. It was Patricia, my real estate agent, and her voice was bubbling with excitement. "Norma, we have 3 offers on your house, all above asking price," she said. "The top bid is from a young family who fell in love with your garden. They said it was your roses that sold them on the home. They want to keep them just as they are." Something in me softened. Knowing that someone else would tend to those roses, the ones Harold and I had planted together, made the sale feel right. "I accept their offer," I said. When I returned to Judith's condo, there was a surprise waiting. Trevor. "I came alone," he said quickly when he saw me hesitate. Isla doesn't know I'm here. We sat in the living room, the sunlight pouring in through the wide windows. Trevor looked tired, older somehow. I owe you an apology, Norma, he said quietly. I should have stopped Isla. I should have spoken up when she started making plans for your house. I studied him for a moment. Why didn't you? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because it was easier not to. And because I thought maybe we could use that money too. He looked me in the eyes. That was wrong. I know that now. What changed your mind? I asked. Kyle, he admitted. He confronted us after you left. Asked how we could treat his grandmother like a bank account instead of a person, out of the mouths of babes, right? My throat tightened with pride. He's a good boy, I said softly. Trevor nodded. He really is. I also came to warn you. Isla isn't taking this well. She's talking about contesting the sale. She has no legal grounds, I said calmly. My attorney made that very clear. I know. But she's not thinking straight right now, he said, standing to leave. Kyle misses you. He'd like to visit if that's okay. I smiled. I'd like that very much. When he left, I sat for a while in the quiet. Judith with her loyalty, Kyle with his courage, even Trevor finally finding his conscience. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I felt free. 3 weeks later, I stood in the empty living room of the house where I had raised my daughter, where Harold and I had shared our short but beautiful marriage. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the gentle dance of dust in the air. Are you okay? Judith asked softly, touching my arm. I'm just saying goodbye, I said. We walked through each room one last time, the walls echoing with faint memories of laughter, birthdays, and quiet evenings. In the bedroom, I stopped by the window that overlooked the rose garden. They promised to take care of the roses, I whispered. Judith smiled. Then they'll take care of everything that mattered here. Downstairs, I handed my keys to Patricia, who gave me a thick envelope in return. Congratulations, Mrs. Wilson, she said warmly. The sale is final. The funds have been transferred to your account. In the car, Judith turned to me with a grin. Ready for your next chapter? I took a deep breath. More than ready. The next morning, I signed the lease on my new apartment at Silver Oaks, a community for active seniors. It wasn't a nursing facility like Isla had threatened. It was bright, full of life, laughter, and independence. My one-bedroom apartment had a small balcony overlooking a garden courtyard. The kitchen was compact but modern, and the sunlight streamed in through large windows. It wasn't the same house I had lived in for decades, but it was mine. And that made all the difference. With Judith's help, I moved my essentials out of storage and bought a few new pieces of furniture. Kyle came over to help, happily setting up my television and showing me how to use the community Wi-Fi. As he worked, I watched him, my grandson, growing into a kind, grounded young man, and I thought of how easily love can twist into control, but also how easily it can heal when truth steps in. That evening, I stood on my balcony watching the sunset, the sky glowing with the same soft light I'd once watched from my old backyard. I had lost a house, yes, but I'd found something far more important. My peace, my independence, myself. This place is cool, Grandma, Kyle said, looking around my new apartment with wide eyes. Way better than our guest room. I smiled, watching him place my books neatly on the shelf. I think so too, I said. Has your mom seen it yet? He hesitated, his expression shifting. No, she hasn't picked up your calls. She's still mad about the house money. I sighed softly. I paid your mother $1,200 every month to live in that guest room, I reminded him gently. And I cooked dinner most nights, did my own laundry, even cleaned the kitchen. I know, he said. Dad tried to tell her that too. After he left, I sat on my sofa surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and let myself feel the sadness I'd been avoiding. No matter how angry or disappointed I was, Isla was still my daughter, the little girl I'd raised alone, the teenager I'd watched walk across the graduation stage with tears of pride in my eyes. How had we come to this? My phone rang, interrupting the thought. An unfamiliar number. Hello? Mrs. Wilson? This is Roger Kent from Sunnydale Retirement Village. Your daughter asked us to contact you about our assisted living options. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then the anger hit. Even now, she was trying to control me, to push me into a place I didn't want and didn't need. Mr. Kent, I said evenly, I appreciate your call, but I've just moved into my new apartment at Silver Oaks, and I'm not interested in assisted living. There was a pause. Oh, he said, clearly caught off guard. Your daughter mentioned you were struggling to live independently. My daughter was mistaken, I replied firmly. I'm perfectly capable, as my doctor will confirm. After hanging up, I sat for a long time, fuming. Then I called Martin Green and told him what had happened. This is harassment, he said immediately. I'll send another letter to her attorney, one that makes it very clear any further interference with your private affairs will have legal consequences. That night I slept better knowing someone finally stood between Isla and her next scheme. The next morning, I had my first visitor at Silver Oaks, Trevor. He stood in the doorway, holding a small potted plant. A housewarming gift, he said awkwardly. It's a peace lily. The guy at the nursery said they're hard to kill. Perfect for me then, I teased, taking it from him. Come in. He looked around, visibly impressed. This is really nice. Did you expect me to be living in chaos? I asked, a wry smile tugging at my lips. He winced. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. Isla keeps saying you're going to waste your money and end up in trouble. I handed him a mug of coffee. That's because she doesn't know me anymore. I've invested most of it. This apartment is comfortable and affordable. I'll be just fine. We sat at the dining table, sunlight spilling through the window. She tried to get me into assisted living, I said quietly. Trevor nodded. I know. I told her not to, but she wouldn't listen. She's convinced you can't manage alone. What I need, I said, meeting his eyes, is respect. Something your wife seems unable to give me. He sighed. She's scared, Norma. When you sold the house, it was like her safety net vanished. She's been counting on that money for years, for retirement, emergencies, Kyle's college. Without it, she feels lost. Lost? I repeated. He nodded. She grew up watching you struggle after Harold passed. I think she's always been afraid of ending up like that, afraid of not having control. For the first time, I felt something other than anger, pity, maybe even understanding. Isla had been 8 when her father died, old enough to sense my fear when bills went unpaid, too young to know why I cried quietly at night. Maybe that fear had grown with her. I never wanted her to go through what I did, I said softly, but that doesn't give her the right to take my security away. I know, Trevor said, and I've tried to tell her that, but she's not ready to listen yet. As he stood to leave, he paused at the door. Kyle wants to know if he can stay over sometime. He misses you. I smiled, my heart warming. He's welcome anytime. Over the next few weeks, I built a quiet, happy rhythm at Silver Oaks. I joined a book club that met in the sunny community room. I started taking water aerobics classes at the pool. I even made a new friend, Eleanor, a retired librarian with a razor-sharp wit and a laugh that could fill the whole hallway. Kyle visited every weekend, sometimes staying overnight on the pull-out sofa. He'd help me hang pictures, fix my TV, or just talk about school. Isla still ignored my calls and texts. I sent her a card with my new address, just in case, but there was no reply. The silence hurt, yes, but it didn't define me anymore. I'd built something new, something peaceful. And one quiet morning, as I watered the peace lily Trevor had given me, sunlight pouring through the window, I realized something simple and true. I hadn't just survived losing my old life. I'd reclaimed my freedom. For the first time in decades, I was living for myself. 1 month after moving into Silver Oaks, I received a letter from Martin. It was brief and to the point. The retirement village incident was the last attempt your daughter made to interfere with your independence. The warning worked. I folded the letter carefully and set it aside. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the courtyard gold, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my pulse quicken. Isla. "Hello?" I answered, my voice tight. "Mom," she said, her tone clipped and controlled. "I need to talk to you about something important." "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can we meet tomorrow? There's a cafe near where you live. The Brewing Pot." "I know it," I said. "What time?" 11, she replied, and hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there for a while, phone in hand, feeling a swirl of emotions I couldn't name. Was this an olive branch, or another attempt to pull me back under her control? Whatever it was, I wasn't the same woman who'd once sat at her dinner table, trembling at the sound of her words. I was stronger now, wiser. If Isla wanted to talk, I would listen. But I would not yield. As the first stars appeared in the evening sky, I made a quiet promise to myself. Whatever happens tomorrow, I will keep building this new life. A life where I'm valued not for what I can give, but for who I am. The next morning, the Brewing Pot was crowded with students and office workers clutching to-go cups. I found a small table in the corner and ordered chamomile tea. My stomach was too tight for coffee. At exactly 11, the bell above the door jingled, and Isla walked in. Her hair was pulled into a severe bun, and she wore a tailored blazer with sharp lines that couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. For a second, our gazes met, and beneath all that cold composure, I saw something fragile. Then she straightened her shoulders and crossed the room. "Mom," she said, sitting stiffly across from me. "Hello, Isla," I said softly. "You look tired." "I'm fine," she replied quickly. "Just busy with work." The waitress came and Isla ordered a black coffee. We sat in silence until it arrived, the distance between us heavier than ever. "How's Kyle?" I asked finally. "He's fine, doing well in school." She hesitated. "He misses you." "I miss him too," I said gently, "though he visits quite often." Her mouth tightened. "Yes, Trevor mentioned that." Another silence fell. "You said you wanted to talk?" I prompted. She set down her cup carefully, as if afraid it might shatter. "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." "All right," she took a breath. "Did you sell the house because of what I said that night at dinner? About you being another mouth to feed?" I met her gaze steadily. "That was part of it," I said. Hearing those words from my own daughter cut deep. "But it wasn't just that. It was realizing you saw me as an obligation, not as your mother. It was discovering that you were controlling my medication, taking my money, and planning to use my home for your lake cabin." She flinched, color draining from her face. "How did you—" "Kyle overheard you," I said quietly, "and I confirmed everything with my pharmacy and my doctor." She looked down, shame flickering across her features. "Why did you want to meet, Isla?" I asked. She looked up, and to my surprise, there were tears in her eyes. "We're losing the house, Mom," she said in a shaking voice. I froze. "What do you mean?" "The bank's foreclosing. We can't keep up with the payments." She gave a bitter laugh. "Turns out we were living beyond our means, just like you said." I sat back, shocked. "Oh, Isla, are you really sorry?" she snapped suddenly, anger breaking through her grief. "Because if you hadn't sold your house, we could have what?" I interrupted quietly. "Taken my money to fix your problems? Isla, that was never going to happen. My home was not your emergency fund." Her eyes filled again. "You don't understand. We have debts. The car, Kyle's private school, the renovations." "Those were your choices," I said gently. "Not mine." "You always lived so carefully," she said, her voice trembling. "Clipping coupons, buying secondhand clothes, never taking vacations. I swore I'd never live like that. I wanted more for Kyle than you ever gave me." The words stung, but beneath them, I finally heard the truth. Fear. "I lived that way because I had to," I said softly. "Your father died when you were 8. I was 35, a widow with a mortgage and a child to raise. I did everything I could to give you a stable life. I know, she said, defensive and small. Do you? I asked quietly. Because it sounds like you resent me for not giving you luxury, but I gave you something much more important, a home, an education, and unconditional love. Tears spilled down her cheeks. And now I'm going to lose my home. Kyle will have to change schools. Everything's falling apart. I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't untangle: sorrow, pity, frustration, and love. Part of me wanted to reach across the table, take her hand, and promise to fix everything like I used to. But I knew that would only feed the same cycle: dependence, control, resentment. For once, I had to let her face her own choices. I'm sorry you're going through this, I said quietly. Truly, but I can't rescue you from the consequences of decisions that weren't mine. She looked at me, tears glistening in her eyes. So that's it? No, I said softly. That's a beginning. Maybe now you'll start rebuilding, the same way I did. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Isla nodded slowly, eyes downcast. I don't know if I can, she whispered. Yes, you can, I said gently. Because you're my daughter, and I know where you got your strength. That night, I stood on my balcony watching the stars appear one by one. The air was cool and still, the peace Lily Trevor had given me glowing faintly in the lamplight. Life had come full circle in ways I hadn't expected. I couldn't change my daughter's choices, but I could live mine with clarity, grace, and self-respect. And maybe, someday, she would understand that what I'd taken back wasn't money or property, it was my dignity. What are you asking me for, Isla? I said at last, keeping my voice steady. Do you want me to give you money to save your house? She didn't answer directly. You have all that money from selling your house. You don't need it all. I do need it, I said calmly. It's my retirement fund, the security that allows me to stay independent in my old age. So you're just going to let us lose everything? Her voice rose, drawing a few curious glances from nearby tables. I took a slow breath. I'm not going to give you money for a house you can't afford, but I do want to help, in a way that actually solves the problem. Her brow furrowed. What do you mean? You're in this position because of poor financial decisions, Isla, not because I sold my house. If I just handed you money, you'd be right back here in a few years. I don't want that for you. She started to argue, but I raised a hand. Please, let me finish. I won't buy your house, but I will pay for a professional financial advisor to help you restructure your debts. I'll cover Kyle's school tuition directly until he graduates, and I'll help you find a home you can actually afford. Isla blinked, her anger fading into surprise. You'd do that? After everything that's happened? You're still my daughter, I said softly. I don't want to enable you. I want to help you become stable. There's a difference. She sat back, digesting my words. What about Trevor? Have you told him this? No, this is the first I've heard about your foreclosure, I said. She nodded slowly. He's been taking extra shifts at work. He didn't want me to tell you, said we needed to fix it ourselves. Trevor's right, I said gently. But accepting help to learn better habits isn't the same as asking for a bailout. We talked for nearly 2 hours, about money, about trust, about boundaries. By the time we left the cafe, we had a plan. It wasn't what she'd come for, but it was something she could live with. Outside, as we stood by the curb, Isla hesitated. Can I see where you're living now? Kyle says it's nice. I was taken aback, but touched. I'd like that, I said. Silver Oaks was just a short drive away. In the lobby, we passed neighbors who greeted me warmly. Eleanor, reading in the common area, waved with a grin. You've made friends, Isla observed in the elevator. Yes, I said, it's a lovely community. Inside my apartment, she looked around, her expression softening. The small space glowed with sunlight and warmth, photos of Kyle on the walls, old pictures of her as a child, and one of Harold and me on our wedding day. It's homey, she said quietly. Not what I expected. What did you expect? I asked, smiling. She shrugged. Something cold. Institutional, maybe. This is my home now, I said. I've made it my own. She walked toward the balcony, noticing the potted roses. You even have plants. You always loved gardening. Just a few pots, I said. But they're thriving. She turned back to me, her face uncertain. I was wrong about you, Mom. About a lot of things. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was a start. I know you were scared, I said softly. Financial insecurity can make people do desperate things. I remember those years after your father died, wondering if we'd make it through each month. I remember too, she said quietly. I think that's why I've always been obsessed with money. I never wanted to feel that fear again. But in trying to protect yourself from one fear, I said gently, you created another. Her eyes filled again. I'm sorry, Mom, for what I said that night at dinner, for how I treated you, for trying to control your life. I took her hands. I forgive you, Isla, but things have to change. I need you to see me not just as your mother, but as a person with my own needs and my own rights. I'm trying, she whispered. It's hard to change overnight. I know, but admitting it is the first step. We talked for a while longer, lighter now that the truth had been spoken. Before leaving, Isla smiled tentatively. Come to dinner next weekend. Just family, no lawyers, no drama. I promise. 6 months later, I sat in the living room of Isla and Trevor's new home, a modest 3-bedroom rental in a quiet neighborhood near Kyle's school. They'd downsized, sold the SUV, and learned to live within their means. With the advisor's help, their finances were finally under control. Kyle sprawled on the floor, proudly showing me his latest science project. Isla brought in a tray of coffee and homemade cookies, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. Trevor sat beside me, telling me about his promotion. We're hoping to buy again someday, he said. Something smaller, with a little garden. Isla wants to try growing tomatoes. She's already started, Kyle chimed in, grinning. They're awesome. I looked at my daughter, who smiled shyly. Mom's been helping me, she said. I think I finally understand why you loved gardening so much. The moment filled me with quiet peace. My family wasn't perfect, but we were healing, growing, rebuilding on honesty instead of control. Later, as Isla walked me to my car, she stopped. I'm glad you stood up for yourself, Mom, she said softly. I didn't see it then, but you taught me something. What's that? That loving someone doesn't mean owning them. Real family supports independence, not dependence. I squeezed her hand, too moved to speak. That night, back in my apartment, the air smelled faintly of roses from the balcony. I opened a new photo album, not of old memories, but of new ones. Pictures of Kyle's visits, Isla's garden, and my friends at Silver Oaks. The house I'd once called home was gone, now filled with a new family's laughter. But from its loss, I had built something even more precious, a life truly my own. And in that life, there was space for everyone I loved, including my daughter, who was finally learning to love me not as her caretaker or her safety net, but as a woman who had earned her peace. It wasn't perfect. Real healing never is. But as I closed the album and breathed in the scent of blooming roses, I knew, without question, it was enough.